Do you have any 10s?
No 10s. Go fish.
All right. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Oh,
sorry.
All right.
Okay, pass it over.
Yeah,
Okay,
clean that up.
Yeah,
okay.
Hi.
All right. Hi. Yeah. So, that's Susan. I'm Christopher. This is introduction to creating websites using Python and Flask. So where we left off, besides a little bit of troubleshooting, was we left off with finally the ability to store all of our data. All those put away?
Those are all put away. We're good.
Perfect. The ability to store our data inside of a database, but we've still been doing all of this development locally. So unless we're going to grant everybody the ability to connect to Susan's system over there, nobody else is going to be able to see all of the great work that we've done on this application. So now what we want to turn our attention to is taking what we've done and sending it out to the world, because after all, the title is Introduction to Creating Websites. So it's right there in the title, web. We need to deploy this out to the web, and that's what we want to take a look at. So we want to see how we're going to take Flask and Redis and put this onto Azure. So to put together our purple slide, we've been building this wonderful website, and now we'd like to share it with the world. How are we going to do it? Well, we got to talk about Azure. So we're going to talk about our Azure accounts. We're going to talk about Redis and Azure, and we're going to talk about Flask and Azure. Now, as far as the Azure accounts go, one very big thing to keep in mind, and you're going to notice the slide here mentions a 30-day free trial, but it's worth highlighting, besides the free trial, that there's a lot of ways that you can go get Azure credits. So for example, if you have an MSDN account, depending on the level of account that you have, you get a certain number of dollars, and I want to say it's between 50 and 150?
Typically around 150. So typically what will happen, if you're working at a big company, there's a very good chance that your company has some sort of MSDN agreement with Microsoft, and generally those agreements often have an Azure component included. So if you're working at a big company, it's worth going and talking to whoever's your IT person works with your licensing and finding out if you have some Azure benefits. If you do, then you can literally sort of connect. What you do is when you create your Azure, it'll say what subscription do you want to use, and you point to your company subscription, and then basically it comes off your company's Azure credits. We also have a program called BizSpark. So if you're starting up your own company that is going to be creating and selling software, things like apps and so on, you can apply for the BizSpark program, which will require you to have a website.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be a nice little requirement when you're applying for your BizSpark. And if you
can use Flask.
Exactly. And when you're accepted into the BizSpark program, you get an MSDN subscription, and that particular level of subscription gives you $150 a month worth of Azure credits as well. So there are certainly a couple of different programs that can give you access. There's also, if you are at a university, if your professor wants to, if you're learning Python and Flask in a university class, your professor can actually request Azure passes for all the students in the class. So that all the students in the class can go ahead and try out Azure, and they again get about $100, $150 worth of free Azure a month, and that's valid for about 6 months. So there's a lot of different options. You
moved that much too fast for me, although I guess maybe you were just like perfect timing. Just as you started that, somebody posted in the Q&A, maybe a good question, is there DreamSpark Azure credit?
There is not a DreamSpark specific Azure credit. I can promise you that's something we're working very hard on. I actually work with DreamSpark. I work with students as part of my job as a technical evangelist. It is something we're discussing with the Azure team right now, saying, hey, how do we work this in so that there's an easy way for any students who have access to that DreamSpark program that gives them the free software to try and include Azure in that. So that is something we're actively working on, but nothing right now.
Okay. Now, one thing that is worth highlighting about those different credits is that they're based on a dollar amount. And the reason it's based on a dollar amount is because there's a lot of different things that you can use Azure for. So you can create websites, you can create Redis, you can create SQL, you can create VMs, you can set up virtual networks.
I literally have a slide when I do Azure presentations that has 200 icons, and those are all different things you can do with Azure. So we're going to focus in on one of them, or two of them here.
Yeah, we're going to focus in on two of them.
But the reason, that's why the credit is X dollars, because we have no idea when we give someone a credit which of those services you're going to want to try.
Exactly. So you have the full flexibility to do whatever it is that you want.
But but let's show them let's show them the Azure features that are going to be able to allow them to put Redis and Python Flask on out to the world.
Yeah, we should also highlight that you can get a 30-day free trial as well.
Anybody can get a 30-day free trial. Anybody.
Yeah, credit card is required, but you can set it to not be charged. So that way, if you overrun your credit amount, you overrun that 30 days, that your credit card is not going to be charged.
And I think that's the default. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's actually said. There's a little checkbox sort of thing when you're creating your trial account that basically sort of says, you know, what do you want to happen when you run out of credits? And you can choose start charging me or shut down my service.
Exactly.
So if you're literally just playing and trying it out, you can do it at zero risk of being charged.
Yep. Now, let's focus in on Redis first and Azure. Now, in order to create a Redis cache, unlike before where we had to download that and install it and start the service, now we can actually do this through the UI. And this is showing the cool new portal, which I love, where you just simply go in, you hit new, and then you hit Redis cache. It will then prompt you for the name that you want to use. It will prompt you for the subscription that you want to use, because you could have multiple, maybe Visual Studio or an MSDN subscription, like is shown here. It could be a one that you're paying for. Different options that are available. You get to choose the location where that's going to be stored. So obviously, choose something close to where you happen to be or where your application happens to be hosted. And then finally, last but not least, is that pricing tier, and that's going to control the amount of storage space that you're going to be able to have.
So shall I go ahead and show everybody how to do that, maybe?
Sure.
Because you got some slides there, but let me jump ahead and
let's just do it. Yeah.
Flip over to my system. What I've done is I've gone here, and if you take a look at the URL I've gone to, it's portal.azure.com, and that takes me to the new Azure portal. And when I go to that portal, I've logged in with my Azure account. And what I can do is I now want to create a new Redis cache on Azure. So I go down to the bottom of the screen there, and there's a little new button. And when I click on that new button, it gives me the option to create all kinds of different things. We were saying there's lots of options. You want an Ubuntu server? You got it. You want a team project? You've got it. You want a New Relic APM? Gotta say, never even heard of that one. You can have that too. But if you scroll further down, you will see one of the options is indeed the ability to create a Redis cache. So I'm going to choose Redis cache, and I'm going to get a bunch of prompts, ask me what I want to call it. Now, if you remember, when we connected to our Redis cache, we specified that we were connecting to localhost. Well, if we're going to put our Redis data store out in the cloud, we're going to have to specify the server name to point to that Redis data store out in the cloud. And that's where this DNS name comes in. The name I type in here is actually going to affect the name of a server I type in when I want to connect to it later. So I can call this my Flask test rediscache.windows.net. So whoops, sorry, one of the things is it all has to be lowercase letters, no spaces. That's why I'm getting a little exclamation mark there. Oh, that name must be used, doesn't like it. Flask test is, if it says that name is not available, remember, this has to be unique around the world, so it means you've got to come up with a name. So I'm going to call it my MVA on...
Lowercase.
Yes, lowercase. MVA, Flask.
That gets me all the time.
I always want to do camel case or Pascal.
Pascal,
case.
yeah.
How about MVA, Flask, Python 2? Are you happy with that? No?
I'm happy with it.
Okay. How about Sue's Awesome DB? You happy with that one?
I think you're limited to the number of characters.
Yes, I think I've got too many names. All right, how about short name?
Really doesn't like it. Just go with short name.
My name. Use at least 6 characters. It's being really difficult. It's funny, I've actually got one already created, and I don't know what's going on, but it is being ridiculous.
It just doesn't, that's okay. So, you'll notice here that you can go in.
I'll go select the rest, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So I can pick the pricing tier. So the pricing tier in this case, for what I'm doing is a very small database. I'm going to be fine with the basic tier, which is cheaper. It's going to use up my credits less quickly. So I'm going to pick the basic tier, and I'm going to select that. Then the resource group, you don't change that. That's used when you start setting up for high availability. Again, for subscription, that's where I would, if I'm working at a big company, maybe they have a subscription I can use. In my case, I have a subscription I have an MSDN subscription, so I pick that, and that determines which subscriptions, credits, or billing would be hit. And location is which physical server in the world is my Redis data store going to be stored on. Now, I can store it on Japan if I want, but if the people who are going to be using my website and storing values aren't living in Japan, I probably want to pick something a little closer to home.
Probably.
So I live out in the east, so I might actually pick the east U.S. because I live in Ontario, and that's actually reasonably close to where I live. So that literally determines the physical location where your database will be. You want that to be physically close to the users. And then when I'm done that, I would literally just click create, and it's going to go off and set that up. Now,
right.
It's okay, I'm not that concerned about the fact I'm having problems with the DNS name because it takes about 10 minutes or so for it to create the Redis data store. I'm not sure why it's so slow, but it takes quite a while.
So a lot of people will say that, that it takes a little while for it to do it. But what I always like to say is think about what's happening here. Now, what this is doing is this is going off and setting up a database server that's going to be globally available to anybody that you decide or any application that you decide to have access. It's now going to be globally available. So it's going to take a little while, absolutely, but it's actually doing quite a bit, and it's still going to be faster and easier to maintain in the long run than if you went off and tried to do it on your own. So, does it take a few minutes? Sure, absolutely, but
it beats having to buy my own server, install it, connect it to a network, install Redis on that so everybody can access it. And by the way, I found a name it was happy with, so it's now going off and creating my Redis cache.
Perfect.
Once I've created the Redis cache, what I would do is I would simply, when I'm ready to go back to it, I would go to Browse.
Yeah, show us the turkey in the oven.
Yeah, and you can actually see if I can get a list of all my Redis caches, and you can see the one I'm in the middle of creating called Sue's Redis cache. That was the name it was finally happy with.
And show us the one that we're going to be using.
Yeah, so you don't have to wait. We've got, the turkey. Over here, we have our completed turkey. And it's from those great cooking shows. And when I select it, I can look up some important information I'm going to need when I connect. So let's say I've forgotten that URL. So I don't, instead of localhost, I know I need a different URL, but I can't remember what it's called. I can simply go to Properties, and over here, you're going to see the host name. So that's what I'm going to type in here. That's going to be my host name.
Yep.
Instead of localhost. Now, here's something really important. Notice the SSL port. All the examples we were doing earlier, we were connecting with port number 6379. One of the things about working with the Azure Redis cache is, by default, it uses SSL, which means it's encrypting things and trying to make sure people aren't sort of looking at your stuff as it's going across.
Exactly. Yeah, just a couple of other really cool things as well. It also makes sure that you're connecting to the system that you think you're connecting to. Because if I'm using this as a back-end database and I've got my application and my application makes a call into it, I want to make sure that I'm calling into the right database and I'm not calling into maybe a server that's trying to spoof the one that I think I'm connecting to, and now all of a sudden I'm putting sensitive data into the wrong place.
Into somebody's database who's trying to steal my data.
Yeah, exactly.
So SSL is more secure, but it does use a different port number. So we're also going to have to change in our connection string. We're going to have to make sure the port is 6380 as well. So that's a couple of little things we need to know. Now, the other thing is, when you are using SSL, you'll also be required to pass in a key. This is an encryption key that's used. So how do you find out what the key is for your cache? Once again, if we take a little look here, you can see there's a little button up here called Keys. If I go and select that button, it will actually bring up a primary and a secondary key. Now, you can't see the entire key, so you won't be able to just zoom in here and steal my keys. But what you can see here is there's this key here. You can use the primary or the secondary. And there's, what's wonderful is this little button here. If you click on that, it will copy the key, so you can just paste it into your code, because you're going to need that in your connection string. You don't want to be typing in lowercase k, lowercase x, lowercase m, uppercase L. The odds of getting that correctly are pretty slim. So that little copy button's very useful. You're going to need that in your connection string. That's going to be the password value.
Yep.
So that's all. That's how you create your Redis cache on Azure, and that's all the information you're going to need about your existing Redis cache, so that you'll be able to connect to it from your Python code. So shall we see if we can actually update our Python code to now connect to this Redis cache?
Sure, sounds good. So let's kind of walk through what we're going to need again. We're going to need the URL that we're going to connect to. We're going to need the primary key, and then there's the updates that we need to make. So we need to go in, our DNS name, Redis cache Windows Net. Our port number is 6380. Now, one very cool thing, again, since you're using the key value pairs, is that we can reorder things. So you're going to notice when I go back to my code that I've put the SSL there.
Because we've named the parameters, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. And since our database isn't going to change, we don't need that. And then I just don't want to put the password out on our screen. By the way, you are going to notice, yes, I'm going to check this code into the into our GitHub. And you're also going to notice that we're going to destroy the cache right after creating this MVA.
Because I'm not going to have you guys all run up my Azure bill.
Yes. So anyway,
by hosting all your websites with my Azure cache.
Yes. So what you're going to notice, let me come back over here to my code, is that there's my little update. You'll notice there's my host, there's the port number, and then you'll also notice, scroll over a little bit, and there's that SSL equals true. And that little thing is going to make sure that it's going to use SSL.
It also tells it to use port 6380. That sort of reinforces it all.
Exactly. So now, let's take our Flask app and actually port this out to Azure. So let's start off by talking a little bit about what an Azure site is. And put simply, it's hosting for web applications. Does that slide say MVC?
No.
Does it say web forms?
No.
Does it say a node?
No.
Does it say PHP?
No, it just says web.
Web applications. Completely whatever technology it is that you want to use. So if you want to use MVC, if you want to use Node, if you want to use Flask, if you want to use fill in the blank, we can host it. So that's the great part, is that it doesn't matter what technology it is that you're using. The next big thing is that Azure will scale. So if you want to just go in and create a little test site, you can do that. If you want to create a full enterprise application that's going to scale, have global failover, and the whole 9 yards, automatic backup, you can do all of that. So you can start very, very small and grow this out to very big. Now, of course, the next question then becomes, well, how much is this all going to cost? Now, the cost, the pricing models, the levels are going to indicate the different features that are going to be available. So whether or not SSL is going to be available, scaling is going to be available, automatic backups, the ability to do deployment from dev staging to production, and so forth. All of that is going to vary based on the pricing level. And again, you know, we need a t-shirt. There's an MVA for that. I do want to highlight that coming up January 14th, that we are going to have an MVA on beginning Azure websites. So if you want to see the power and capability that Azure Websites has to offer, come join us on the 14th. You can check all of that out. Now, for our purposes, we got a very simple little app here. So we're just going to go with our free websites. And our free websites are a perfect little playground.
Yeah, they really are. Exactly. Playground's a perfect word for it.
Yep.
It's just a place you can go. You want to explore, try putting websites out in the cloud. And cloud is one of those buzzwords these days. You are going to be dealing with the cloud. So
absolutely,
you got to start learning it somewhere.
Exactly. And so you get up to 10 of these. But keep in mind, you're only allowed 5 concurrent connections. So again, it's a playground. It's just some place to go off and poke at things and just kind of see, all right, well, what's going on? Well, let's go in and see what's going on. Now, Susan did everything through the Azure portal.
Yep.
And that's cool. And I love the Azure portal, and it's a fantastic little tool there. But here's the thing. I'm in Visual Studio, Susan. Mm-hmm. I want to use Visual Studio, Susan.
Yep.
Can I use Visual Studio?
Yes.
Cool.
Which is awesome.
All right. I'm just going to use Visual Studio.
One less interface to learn. Exactly.
So I'm just going to right-click here, and I'm going to say Publish. And it's going to say, all right, well, choose your target. Microsoft Azure Websites, or Import or Custom, and a whole bunch of other options. In my case, I'm going to go with Microsoft Azure Websites. Click. And now it's going to say, all right, well, sign in. Okay, well, let me sign in. And let me just go ahead and cause a distraction over here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Hi.
Causing a distraction.
Yep. That's a distraction.
Barry, distraction. Thank you.
Oh, wait. So this is the part where Susan says, so meanwhile, I was talking earlier, one of the things I'm going to throw into the QA window, we were talking about ways to access Azure. I'm about to toss up in the Q&A window the link for where you access Azure education grants, because I was mentioning that ability to get the free Azure for anyone teaching courses, which is really popular because say you want to try web hosting and you want the students to build websites and deploy them or try storing Redis on Azure and so on. We do have those great educational grants. So I'm going to put that into the chat window in case anybody's looking for it.
Perfect. Okay. So now, back over to my system. Now you're going to notice that I can deploy this out to a little site. You'll notice we have a little last-minute test that we had from the other night. I'm just going to go in and click New, and it's going to say, all right, well, give me the name of the site, and let's say MVA Flask. It's green. The subscription, I'm going to go in with Visual Studio Premium. It's going to ask me for my region. I'm going to go with West US. It's going to ask me for a database. I don't need a database because we're going to wind up calling Redis as a cloud service.
Okay.
So I don't need to create a brand new database here. So that's it. That's all I have to do. And then click Create. And then just a little back and forth here with a little green. Waiting. There I go with the little dance again.
All right.
We're waiting. Now again, people will look at that and go, why is it taking so long? Think about what it's doing.
Yeah, it's still a lot simpler than going out, purchasing a server, bringing the server home, installing an operating system on that server, installing IIS on that server, configuring it and trying to set up all the security for all of that, and then figuring out how do you deploy your website to that server that you just bought and installed and did all that work on.
Exactly. I got better things to do with my time. It's football season, All right.
Hockey season.
Rabbit season. So now that this has come up, I'm now going to just simply hit publish. That's it. And so now what it did is it created a free website for me automatically. It is taking all of my code here, it's packaging it all up, and it's sending all of that up to our little MVA Flask site. And in about another 12 seconds here, it's going to pop up a copy of Internet Explorer that's going to show me the website that we have created. So we'll just kind of wait. Again, moving the mouse, and you'll notice, sure enough, there's the little create a question. So I'm going to click on create a question, and this is going to be Azure, and can I create free websites? And the answer is yes. I'm going to hit submit question. It created it. And then I'm also going to go in and I'm now going to say / question Azure. Enter. Can I create free websites? And the answer, of course, is yes, and hit submit. And all of this is now done on the cloud. This has all been deployed out to Azure. And the couple of things that I like here is the fact that this is so much simpler. And I know we've been sort of beating this into the ground, but it is worth highlighting one last time, and I promise this will be the last time. This is so much simpler than going off and having to set up a server on your own. And you'll notice that the Visual Studio tooling here is pretty impressive. So when I was ready to deploy out my website, I was able to just do that straight from here. And you would also notice that if I went back into Visual Studio, I made a couple of changes. Imagine I made a couple of changes.
Okay.
I go in, I make a couple of changes, and I'm ready to push these out again. It's just as simple as right-click and publish.
Cool. It doesn't matter if you're doing it locally or if it's out on Azure. When you say publish, it sends it to wherever you wanted it sent.
Exactly. That was pretty cool.
That is pretty amazing. I mean, literally, we've taken that website, but we built from scratch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if somebody
with really only one error.
And what really boggles my mind is I have to admit, if somebody had told me 2 years ago, I'd be doing a Microsoft course showing someone how to deploy Python and Redis onto Microsoft Azure, I might have thought they were nuts. I gotta say, times have changed. It's kind of cool that we're sitting here doing Python and Redis, which are open source technologies, and putting them out there on Microsoft Azure.
I have to say, kind of just following right along with that, is that I've been a Microsoft guy pretty much through and through since about NT4. I actually got my CNA on NetWare 312. Again, I'm dating myself here. But since NT4, I've pretty much been all Microsoft. I had a little bit of a tangent with Linux. I did Linux for a little bit, just kind of played around with it. I did just enough Cold Fusion to be dangerous with it. But outside of that, it's been Windows, it's been SQL, C#, web forms, and every other Microsoft technology. Do you want to know when I started getting into and doing open source? Are you ready for this? When I got a job at Microsoft. True story.
But yeah,
so it's a very different world.
Yeah.
Now
you don't have to publish your websites to Microsoft Azure. There are other places you can host websites.
Mm-hmm.
Said that's Azure is one of the great places to store it, but certainly that's not your only choice. You can absolutely do research on other web hosting options as well. But yeah, the Azure is very easy. It integrates really well with Visual Studio.
Yep.
And there is the support for Redis on Azure as well. So it was a nice example of a place where you can put everything.
Yeah. So with that, the big thing to highlight now to everybody, I don't have a slide, unfortunately, of the what did we learn and now what can you do with this? Well, what did we learn? We learned how to get in and start working in Flask. So we started off kind of talking about the basics of Flask. We rolled that into setting up our templates and detecting the request types and responding to it. Then we added on a data store and closed all of that out with publishing. And that really is, that's the core toolkit that you need to create any type of application. So you now have enough that you could go off and create some simple applications. So maybe you needed to set up something to do polling. Maybe you needed something to...
Maybe you're setting up your own hockey pool.
Yeah,
kind of thing. That kind of stuff. Absolutely. Sorting the schedule for your volleyball team and sharing information. And people can report their game scores at the end of a game so you're keeping track of a sports league.
The way that I learned ASP, and this was, again, years ago, but the way that I learned ASP was actually going off and creating a website for our fantasy football league.
There you go.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter what you're doing to practice as long as you're exercising the muscle. Yep. That's the important part. Well, with that, what do you say we call it a day here? I think we've done a fair amount here. So a couple of real quick things. Number one is you're going to notice a little poll down at the very bottom. Please do go ahead and answer that poll really quickly. Mm-hmm. Number two, do thank everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you guys had as much fun as we did.
So are we done?
I believe we are done. No more eye patches required. And I want to thank everybody for joining. Please check out the couple of next Web Wednesdays. I believe the next date that we're back is January 14th on a Web Wednesday. There are other MVAs between now and then. Susan, again,
merci,
always a pleasure.
Vielen Dank. Auf Wiedersehen. Ciao. It's been awesome.
So long.
Konnichiwa.
Thank you very much.